Welcome to Inspired Edinburgh, powerful conversations helping you reconnect with your purpose. I'm Elliot Reeves, and my guests today are Andrea Domenichini and Jon Waterlow. Dre and Jon are founders of Voices in the Dark, a podcast that explores the human experience and is currently breaking down Robert Greene's seminal book, The 48 Laws of Power. Gents, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
You're absolutely welcome.
That's great.
Yeah, it is, yeah. I've listened to bits and pieces of your work and I'm really enjoying it.
Oh, good. Thank you. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Which episodes have you been listening to?
The most recent one that you did, I think it's episode number 30.
Okay.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. Very interesting. And I think we'll look to explore some of the themes that have been coming out of your work a bit later. But for now, it would be great to find out, I suppose, a bit more about each of you and your backstories. So, yeah, who are you guys?
Oh no, the most distressing question of all to begin. You know, that's actually a really deep Zen meditation, like a koan that people struggle with their whole lives. They sit and meditate. Who am I? Who am I? Pulsing away.
Well, we did the Peter Sage exercise where we shouted it out really loud, so you should have a pretty good...
Yeah, I find that's the Peter Sage, you went to one of his events, maybe you did the same thing. You have this I am statement. First of all, you have to become calm with just saying I am, and that's enough. I found that really helpful actually, because so when I'm asked this sort of question, there's the confusion that arises, right, where you think, what I'm meant to tell you is what job I do or what education I've got, or all these things that are really things that you do or have done. Whereas when you're phrasing it still as something as though it's your essence. You know, when someone goes, I am an accountant, I'm like, I think you're so much more. You know? I hope you are. I hope you are so much more. So what sort of information do you want to know?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I suppose, maybe the types of work that you've both done and the way in which the work that you've done has influenced the way that you are. You know, listening to your work, you're both clearly very intellectual.
Good.
Yeah, I do believe that. And I you know, you're absolutely right. To most people, when they're asked a question, it's a very open question, but to many people, it's just quite an innocuous question, and they will just simply answer it. You know, this is my job. This is who I. You know,
most people don't have an existential crisis when someone asks.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah. Well, okay. Do you believe that you've had some sort of existential crisis?
Yes.
More than
often,
one?
maybe daily. I think so. I think that when people ask that question to me, instead of just feeling as though I can just say, oh yeah, this, and this, and not be sort of emotionally engaged in it, it hits me like, I don't know who I am or how to say it. So I'm trying to become more recently through like lots of meditation, reflection. I've been changing a bunch of things in my life, moving away from an academic sort of career trajectory, which is where I was heading, that I'm trying to be more comfortable with the uncertainty and just the I am statement. I do things that I find interesting. I like, I love making our podcast. I like asking questions, learning about things, sharing that with other people, have interesting conversations, be entertaining, provocative, shake up established ways of thinking, both for myself and for other people. Basically sharing ideas, discussing ideas, digging into those are the things that I like to do. And I suppose the things that I like to do are kind of, therefore, who I am. But otherwise, I am someone who, when you ask the question, I go, I don't know. It's not just sitting there. It's not so sitting there answering me.
Dre, what's your take on it?
Well, and as far as that is concerned, I think it's because you're kind of still trying to figure it out. Yeah. And it worries you, gives you anxiety figuring it out. And so when someone else puts you on the spot, it just triggers that cascade.
Yeah, I'm triggered.
Like,
you triggered me.
I don't know who I am. But I've had to do this quite a lot, and I've just come up with a bit of a formula of explaining who I am, because I kind of see it more of a, okay, this person is trying to find out what kind of person I am, so they can tick certain boxes and know how to talk to me or what they can talk to me about. So I'm Italian. I was born in Italy. I was an autistic child, very distracted, in the clouds kind of thing. Always reprimanded for sort of doing this instead of listening to the teacher. Quite a happy kid, but a bit weird. My family moved to New Zealand when I was 12 because my dad was sick of sort of Italian life, bureaucracy, difficulties, and all sorts of corruption and things like that. So we moved to the opposite side of the world, opposite lifestyle, out in the open, friendly kind of thing, but a little bit backwards. I grew up there, and so I was a child of two worlds in a way, which it's like a recurring theme for me as well, because my parents are completely opposites as well. So I'm a child of two worlds in many, many different ways.
Yeah.
In New Zealand, I grew up sort of in the open spaces, sort of spending a lot of time outdoors, and I went into science because that was kind of my passion as a kid. Science and history were my two things that I really cared about. And I wanted to become the Bill Gates of biotechnology, that's what I said at the time, because I wanted to have a Microsoft-sized company. This was before Microsoft started shrinking.
Wow.
And primarily the things I wanted to do was defeat cellular aging,
Wow.
regrow organs, that kind of thing, and enhance humans cognitively and physically. That was what I wanted to do. But after a degree, and a postgraduate degree and a master's, I figured out that you couldn't really do that as a scientist. It's not meritocratic like software engineering. It's not like you have a cool idea, let's test it out. Also because it's not cheap. Whereas computers prices have come down to the point, where Steve Jobs and Wozniak could build relatively cheaply something in the garage. You can't do genetics in your garage easily. And so I thought, okay, I'll need to rethink this. I'm a little bit sick of New Zealand. It's too small for me. It feels too provincial. I want to go live in Europe. I don't want to do science right away. I want to learn business because I think I need to be a businessman. So when I came here, I came here because I wanted to come to Europe. I would have liked to go to America, but I couldn't because it's difficult, green cards, and it was post September 11th as well, so very difficult. But I could come to here because I had a European passport, and my options were really countries that I spoke a language of, so Italy, Ireland, and the UK. And I didn't want to go back home, so that ruled that out. And I didn't want to live in a small town because that's kind of what I did in New Zealand. New Zealand's small town everywhere.
Yeah.
And so that left London really. And so I came here and I didn't know what to do. And then things started just happening, and one thing after another. So I joined a startup. It was called the Geek Squad. It was a computer startup, and I thought, okay, a startup will be cool because I'll learn business skills. I'll learn how a business grows from nothing. And I got involved in it, became a spokesperson, did a few things for that. But then I fell into the trap of, okay, well, maybe this is a thing that I can pursue a career in. And I couldn't. There was various reasons, or at least it also moved a lot slower than I expect things to move.
In what respect?
Like, I don't want to do the same job for more than 2 years.
Uh-huh.
That drives me insane. Like, I get bored really easily. Like, I'll learn something really, really quickly. I'll become really, really good at it. I'm like, okay, next. And they're like, no. you can't go to the next thing. There's also this kind of weird thing where people expect you to go through a certain hierarchy to get to something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but I'm good at that thing that you want me to do another 10 jobs before that I don't know how to do. I could do that. Now, why do I have to prove myself at stuff that I'm shit at first? That doesn't make sense to me. But there's a certain expectation of, growth and slow progression.
Yes.
So I got tired of the Geek Squad, left that, and I tried to find another job, and I wanted to learn how to do things properly. Well done, because they did a lot of mistakes, because they let the Carphone Warehouse, which was the UK partner for Best Buy Electronics, who started the not started the Geek Squad, but runs the Geek Squad in the US. So they started it together in the UK as a joint thing because they wanted to try and suss each other out as business partners, which fell apart really badly. But so the Carphone Warehouse tried to do their style of thing, which was super cheap stuff, mass produce, bosh it out, and everything will be fine. That's our business model. Whereas the Geek Squad itself was meant to be a high quality brand. And then, so I that's what I expected from them. So I tried to go to a proper high quality brand, which was Apple, to learn their branding and systems and things like that. I wanted to know how to do things the way that they did it, because I found the way that they did things inspiring. Mm-hmm. Did that for a while, and I just keep repeating that pattern. I forget the reason why I joined in the first place, and kind of think, oh, I could make a career out of this. And then I hit walls, mostly made out of middle management, that prevented me from going to places.
Interesting.
And leaving Apple, that was kind of, I had a few other jobs after that, but it was just a spiral of shorter and shorter jobs, where the last one I only lasted 1 month.
Okay.
Because I have ideas, I want to do things, and I'm always prevented. And I just kind of realized that that's kind of my problem. That's me, that's the way I am. Why can't I convince other people to give me the opportunities that I want? And so from that point, it's been self-development. And through that, I came to London Real. I started helping Brian Rose out 4 years ago, roughly, a little bit longer than that. And I saw it as an opportunity to test what I thought I was. So I think I'm an amazing entrepreneur that can do sorts of all crazy, really high quality things without having to learn how to do this first or prove myself that way and that way. The classical millennial problem, the entitlement problem. And I thought I could. I said, well, now I can, because if someone has built something already, I don't have to worry about building that. I can prove myself on that, test my ideas out, help it grow, and earn my keep, basically. And so I worked to help Brian grow London Real to where it is. 4 years ago, they only had about 4,000 YouTube subscribers. That's 200,000. They used to split 3 cameras. That was one of the first things I told them we needed to change. It took a while to convince them.
Really?
But yeah, we just kind of worked on improving a little bit every month, a little bit every week, which was hard because it was essentially me and him. Nick left shortly after, his co-host. I joined, and we had some bunch of interns, but they never really did their work. Whereas I kind of gave 100%. Mm-hmm. And for 2.5 years, almost 3 years, it was just me and him, really. Oh. And that is my take on that whole, who are you?
Yeah, who are you? Yeah.
In that particular sense, because that answers your question of where you've come from and what have you done. Mm-hmm. But if you ask me in a more existential sort of way, I would answer differently.
I need to take notes on how to answer the question.
I was going to say, you need to get yourself one of those.
That was a little... I had an interesting conversation with some people at the monastery that I spent the last month in. They pointed out that question can often be, it's more for the person asking. You need to take care of their needs in the way you said at the beginning, which is, what is it that they want to know? They want to know how to relate to you. And they want to lose that sense of, who is this person, the possible danger, how can I interact in a positive way, or do I want to? So it's not really about me and my crisis, which it's actually about, what do they want to know? So it's something I need to try and bear in mind.
Yeah. That's really, I find this actually really fascinating. I find it fascinating because nobody to date has had quite, I suppose, the reaction that you had to the question. Although some people have kind of gone down a bit of a rabbit hole and thought, who am I? They're sitting there trying to process, so that is really interesting.
And how do you spin it too? Because I could tell you, I'm from Edinburgh, and then people go, yeah, where's your accent? I got lost in the post. Because my family moved around a bunch, but Edinburgh's my home and I grew up here. But when you have, in the UK, the accent is really important. So there's this kind of sort of suspicion that plays into it, are you sure you're from here?
But once again, that's more about them, because they think you're playing a trick on them.
Yeah, I suppose they do. To what end, I don't know.
Huh. Wow. Okay. Something that I find it's something that I've been thinking about, and it's obviously you're on the autistic spectrum is probably how you would say it. And Jon, I know that you've battled with depression at some level, certainly.
Sure.
I don't know probably the full extent of it. But what really interests me is how is your experience of life different to say my own, and how do I gain a better understanding of what you're experiencing. And that's something that I think it's something that I've probably not been especially conscious of for a long time, but it's something that I've started to more and more think about, like, what is this person actually, you know, when I ask, for example, who are you? Your reaction to that would be different to other people's reactions.
I guess to find out about us, you subscribe to our podcast.
In a way, the way we answered is quite telling. His was like,
Yeah.
stop hurting me. And mine was like, here's my list. I'm going to tell you exactly who I am.
Very specifically, the itinerary.
So it is quite a reflection of our sort of particular outlook.
I think the thing to remember, it's a trite thing that turns up that people put up on Facebook, that everybody is fighting a battle that you don't know anything about. And that is worth remembering, that maybe it's not always this battle of life and death, but you don't know how they're experiencing their reality that day. Maybe the person who you think is being a total shit because they just shoved someone out the way in a queue, or, you know, they didn't give up their seat to an elderly person. Well, especially with that, maybe they've got an injury you can't see, but also maybe someone close to them died that day and they're in a totally different world.
Yeah.
And you don't know. Or maybe they're a dick. You know, it's worth remembering that one too.
Even simpler than that, I had a conversation very recently with someone who was dating this particular girl, and at one point she called him or sent him a message saying, "You're lying, you're a liar," over basically he'd said that he did something or was something, it's important, it's irrelevant, but 2 years ago. And she'd found out that it was 18 months ago. And he'd lied.
Oh.
Whereas he'd just kind of forgotten.
Yeah.
But to her, because she's very, very analytical, and she wouldn't forget that detail, and she'd be very specific, omitting that must have been intentional, right? So she couldn't even think that to him it could be something that you forget.
Yeah.
So it's as simple, it's not even a battle, it's just people have different frameworks. And if you expect people to think the way that you do, you're gonna think that they're liars or, you know, trying to get you in some way. Or...
I mean, we have an interesting dynamic at times where, so I will like finish a piece of writing, which for me is really kind of often a difficult process. It's something I love to do, and I stress over it, and then I create my beautiful piece, and I'm like, yes, there we go. Dre, look at this. And he'll look at it and go, and assume that I know that he thinks it's good. Because, so for me, I overly feel the need for the sort of the reassurance,
validation, yeah.
you know, which is something I'm really trying to work on, because it's, as was someone pointed out to me, praise doesn't make you better. Praise doesn't improve the quality of the work. It doesn't improve your quality of life, really. It doesn't improve your ability to create what you create and know whether it's good or not, the praise stuff. And Dre assumes that, of course, I should know that he thinks it's good, or, you know, that I've done a good job, or that he's supportive of me, and so on. And that's kind of so I can explain my side of it. And how do you experience that side?
Yeah, that's not something I particularly require myself, so I forget that other people require it.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like I have to get into a habit, and I have to learn who requires it, because also I tend not to assume that people are the same. So I don't know, for example, whether someone's going to expect me to hug them. Like, right, like, and it used to be something that would make me really nervous to understand, like, is this going to be a handshake sort of guy? Is this a hug sort of guy? Like, I don't know how you want me to do this, because if it was up to me, I would do neither. I'm okay with...
What would be your preference? Just standing it from afar and just...
Well, it's not that I don't want to do it, but it's that if it wasn't a social convention, it wouldn't even occur to me. And that's just the way my mind works. But I've come to know that if I don't do it, then people think something is wrong, because they expect it and they think it's normal. So then I start worrying about, okay, so is this going to be a handshake? What's going on? And then maybe they'll just grab me and give me a hug, and I'm like, okay, he's a hugger, so next time I'll hug him. And
categorize, clear.
Because to me, it's not a big deal, and it's more about communicating on your level.
Yeah.
And once I know what the level is, I'm like, cool.
But I mean, is it unorthodox that you would have any level of anxiety with respect to whether someone's going to hug or handshake you?
I guess well, I don't know if it's orthodox, but it's physical contact is just a thing that people on the autistic spectrum tend to find a bit. We feel it's way more intimate.
Okay, yeah.
So someone that I don't think is a friend, to me, it's just an acquaintance. Giving me a hug is no different than if they came up and give me a kiss. You know, it's that same kind of, this is happening to me and I don't really want it to. Like, it just feels very intimate. And I don't find you that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So it's that kind of, so if you wanted to kind of relate to that feeling, it's the same as unwanted advances. Even though to most people it's such a low level physical contact that it's not sexual or any way intimate, to me it feels that way. So having to negotiate and figure out whether I'm expected to reciprocate, you know, it used to be stressful. My personal development journey has been trying to overcome and step outside of this kind of box because it's limiting, and it prevented me from finding, you know, from advancing in various things, personal relationships, business, career-wise, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to be constricted by that framework.
I think in terms of your question about how to better appreciate where other people are coming from, sometimes I think the important thing is to appreciate that you cannot understand where they're coming from. And though you might, you know, that doesn't mean that you can't interact with them in a productive and sensitive way. But when it comes to something like someone who's experiencing deep depression, one of the worst things to say is, I understand how it feels. I understand. Yeah. And you're just like, no, you fucking don't. I mean, people will say it because they go, yeah, you know, we all get down sometimes. And I want to punch you in the face. Like, it's different that you felt sad one day to the fact that suddenly you can fall down the abyss into the pit where you're lying on the ground, hiding under a blanket, unable to move, and just wishing that you were dead. There are differences there. But the problem, you know, both sides need to think about that. So I think it's best not to say, I understand, just go, I can't possibly understand, but, you know, I'm here. If I can help in any way, know that I'm here. And sometimes just being there is enough. And for me, I find that the stories, the negative thought patterns and stories that I can tell myself tend to go away when I'm around people that I like. It feels a bit like I can't indulge those things because I'm surrounded by a different set of social conventions and expectations, or I know how I should act in these ways, and it's easier because there's people there watching. Whereas on my own, I can trick myself and go, no, I guess there's no point in trying to do the positive thing. Maybe I'll just go down this spiral. And it wears grooves in your habits. If you have thought processes that just cascade, it's, you know, you put one toe in and suddenly you've slipped and you've gone all the way down, instead of just being able to go, I feel a bit bad. Oh well. Yeah. Back to work.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you've done in order to try and cope with depression?
Just killed and killed again. So many deaths. It took some time before I accepted that there was like anything that I was going to do about it. And then my boyfriend at the time said, no, we need to do something. Like after another like evening, it's often very exacerbated by alcohol, and I'd had another kind of lurching back and forth evening between, oh, everything's fine, no, I'm inconsolable, tears everywhere, you hate me, everyone hates me, but not as much as I hate me. And he's like, this has got to stop, you know, this is very difficult for everybody and you're hurting yourself. So I went to the doctor, and of course the doctor gave me antidepressants. And I was against that because I thought I don't want to just numb out the feelings, because I'll still feel them, and it's like I thought it was like putting earplugs in, like the noise is still there, you're just blocking it in some way. That wasn't how I felt it though. I felt it was more like, I heard someone describe this in, I think, the documentary Stephen Fry made, The Secret Life of the Manic Depressive, that instead of having this full spectrum going up and down in intensity, you could instead do the widescreen envelope effect like they did on videos before we all had 16:9 TVs, the black bars, and you can live in the middle. you don't have to be in the extreme up or the extreme down. I never really had extreme ups, but some people, damn it. And that felt kind of comfortable. And then after a few years, that seemed to just screw up, and they gave me different ones, and then we kept increasing the dosage, and that was just life, and I thought that's how it's going to be. And then I suppose I got to a kind of phase of, I had a really, really difficult breakup, which wasn't just an end of a relationship. I'd really done a lot of my key insecurities were deeply, deeply bound up in that relationship. So it ended up that we sort of set off each other's insecurities, and it just kind of nuclear blast of, I came out of it going, I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am anymore. So much of what I thought was important about me and my identity, I had invested in this relationship. And now I wasn't sure anything. Why am I getting up in the morning at all? And that, I think, at some level made me realize these pills aren't really enough. I can still get into these states. And during that relationship, in certain dramatic moments, I tried to kill myself on a couple of occasions. And on one of those occasions, I was only stopped because someone stopped me. The second occasion, it was very touch and go. I was standing on a roof, and I was like, I wasn't sure that I would die at the bottom. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to horribly injure myself. I just want to end. So kind of, if I'd been in a higher building, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't be here right now. So, well, the pills don't seem to be doing enough of a good job here. And then I started hearing about ayahuasca. And the more that I heard, the more I thought, okay, maybe this is something to get into. And after that breakup, I started seeing a counselor regularly, who I still do. It's been a couple of years, I guess. And that, for the first time, it was someone who, because I tried counseling before, mostly sorry, counselors of the world, my experience, it's an idiot sitting across from you who just rephrases what you just said back at you. I feel so anxious, I'm not really sure what to do with my life. And they go, it sounds like you're a bit anxious and you're a bit uncertain about where to go. And they're like, I know, fuckface. That's what I just told you. Yeah. So they're different dudes, gradual levels of, move. It's sometimes I think you need someone like a close friend who can tell you you're doing a lot better than you were 6 months ago, because I find that I at least am so in the moment and have such a kind of fuzzy sense of my emotional state from 6 months ago that I don't know. It's like when you, if you don't do a before and after picture, if you go on a diet or some gym thing, you don't really see it so much. You need a visual cue or someone to tell you. And so as part of going to drink ayahuasca, you can't take SSRIs, the most common kind of antidepressant they give out. So I stopped, and I was kind of fine. And I felt the volatility was greater, the possibility of entering kind of extreme states. But it was quite a surprise to go, wait, how much were those things doing at all at that stage? And I mean, the ayahuasca is a whole other story, and I've already been, I don't know if I need to go into the whole thing here, and just I could talk about it for a long time. But that certainly shook up the snow globe of my head again. Yeah. And it doesn't magically cure depression. It doesn't really magically do anything, but it can help you realize what's not working for you. But then when you realize something like that, I wrote an article about this, guess what? You then have to change stuff, and that's unsettling and disturbing. But most people, in my experience of reading or hearing about people's ayahuasca experiences, they say, yeah, and then I totally understood. It was all because of this one event in childhood, or I finally found out how to love myself and now everything's great. Well, I think they're often spoken to right afterwards. And then as you go back into your everyday life, it's very hard to keep that clarity, and you have to put a lot of effort into actualizing what you saw and felt and making that real. I don't remember what the question was anymore.
How you dealt with depression and stuff.
I took drugs and then I took different drugs.
That's the key.
You've had experiences with psychedelics as well.
Yes, and I feel they were instrumental in, I always like to say curing my autism, but it's kind of a funny word because people would assume that it disappeared and now I'm different. Whereas when I explain it, I like to say, before I was locked in a room, and that was my room. I knew where everything was, but I wasn't really aware of the outside world. I couldn't understand anything outside of this. Several life experiences left me able to kind of peer outside a crack in a door that wasn't there before. And I could look outside and see other people, you know, playing together and enjoying themselves, but I couldn't join them. I didn't know how to get out. Various things helped me push that a little bit more open so I could kind of see more of that and feel like I could go. That was part of it because I could see better. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until psychedelics and MDMA that I could leave that room. Now I can leave that room, but I can also go back into it. Mostly intentionally, but sometimes during times of high stress and anxiety, it's by default that happens. I just go back in there. So that's kind of my visual representation of what it's like.
Yeah. Yeah.
What really stands out for me, just because I love music so much, is that Dre told me he never really emotionally understood or could connect with music until psychedelics.
It was just a pretty sound. But when people was like, "Oh, I feel that song," I'm like, "Okay, cool." Like, I understand, but I didn't. But afterwards, it was just like a punch in the heart. Like listening to things, it was like, I get it. It's sort of painted emotion. It's like, yeah, it's interesting. It's a life-changing experience.
Wow.
Knowing that I didn't understand music my whole life until that point. Like, and you only realize it afterwards. It's one of the, and because it also speaks to a lot of things. You sort of think, is there anything else I don't understand that I'm sure I understand, and that someday something will switch. I'm like, oh, that's what it was. So that it kind of opens your eyes to the possibility that could be hiding anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, fundamentally changed my life. Possibly the most, definitely amongst the top experiences of anything that's ever happened to me. It just made me a better person.
I saw it was a short video on Facebook, and it was an excerpt of a Graham Hancock interview, and it was basically a diatribe about how these types of drugs can create such profound shifts in people. But there's still, I think, society isn't anywhere close to being accepting of substances like that, because they're still so kind of foreign to people. So what would you say to people who think that, you know, these are just drugs that shouldn't be taken?
Well, if you think that, you probably shouldn't take them. You're definitely not ready. And I think it's just a byproduct of society. It will always be kind of like that because they alter our perception. They make us question the social order and our assumptions. That is dangerous to society. It is definitely dangerous because society works sort of because we have agreed upon conventions. The moment you start stirring that, there is danger. There is, to the establishment, the hippie culture of the 60s was like a crazy danger to stamp out. You know, they saw it as a gateway to communism and socialism and all sorts of things that to them was horrible. And even these days, like, even if it was perfectly all like lovey-dovey in today's society, it would be so in a structured way, because most people follow. They don't have that kind of like, what if everything's wrong kind of mentality. And to establish a place where people think, what if everything's wrong, even in a loving society, would be dangerous, because then there'll be some people going, well, what if we shouldn't be loving? What if we should be capitalist? And so I think they'll always be kind of seen that way. I don't think they'll ever be fully accepted, because they can make even the most simple assumptions, such as, well, I don't have to be nice to my parents. They were horrible to me. Maybe I can leave home. Like, no one's going to think that it's a great idea to hand these out because they have those profound life-questioning effects. And we like things to be steady.
I think that there's also things may change more, not just with the research that's going on with organizations like MAPS. They're now in phase 3 clinical trials with MDMA to treat PTSD, and it's pretty effective with depression as well, I can attest. But what changes is that the more people talk about it as well. I think it's maybe got some similarities with, well, actually I was going to say like coming out of the closet, that people, but actually I was reading this book, non-fiction by Terry Pratchett, and he said, I didn't really know this, that cancer was the thing that people just didn't talk about. People would die after a long illness in the newspapers. It was seen as like shameful or like taboo or something you just didn't know. We don't talk about cancer. So I guess that's in like the 50s and 60s and maybe even later. I'm not too sure. But now, you know, we're all aware of that and know that it can hit anyone, anywhere, at any time, really. So when it becomes a thing that you know someone who has that experience and you know it humanizes it. So if you think, oh, those crazy hippies who take the psychedelics, they're useless they're a part of a world that I don't understand and haven't seen and don't really like. And then if someone that you already know is an interesting person who's on your wavelength and fulfills whatever criteria you have for being a good person, and then you realize, oh, well, they've taken psychedelics and they say it was really enriching for them as a person, and come to think of it, they do seem kind of calmer recently, then it becomes different. Now it's suddenly within your horizon of understanding. And which is why there's kind of this push from like, I guess like psychedelic societies and so on to say, come out of the psychedelic closet and say. And anyone I think who's taken psychedelics would tell you that it's, okay, it can be amazing, exciting and thrilling in various ways, but it can also be absolutely terrifying. It's not simply fun. The idea, say, of taking, to me, of you can't take ayahuasca in a party scenario. Apparently some people have, but they're insane. Like you vomiting, you could be shitting yourself, like the doors of perception have been thrown open and you're being hurled through them. A lot of it's deep, emotional, difficult work. And even with something like MDMA, that's not exactly a psychedelic, but has sort of related positive effects. There are plenty of stories of people saying, well, they took MDMA as they were going to a party and suddenly something really powerful came up, some emotional thing, some memory they hadn't thought about, and everyone around them is like, shut up, you know, we're here to party, stop trying to share this thing. So how you use these things, why you use them, completely determines, or like hugely determines the experience, the effect, the why. I mean, the same way as like people point out that you can abuse anything. You can drink so much water you will die. That doesn't mean we need to ban water.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, somewhere on the internet there's child porn. Ban the internet. I'm like, well, you're mixing things too widely together. And when we say drugs, we think bad, but we then ignore the fact that that's like saying food.
Yeah.
You know, there's a wide variety of effects that food can have on you. And some is fatal to some people and not to others. And what's the line, like everything, the difference between a medicine and a poison is the dose.
Yeah. But we do this all the time. Even the word natural, belladonna, like poison, is like natural. Technically, arsenic is natural. It's found, but you might not want to, put it inside you. But people use it as a way to say good.
Yeah,
and we do that all the time. We have these class words that we use to emotionally sort of judge something. And that's just a human trait that happens all the time. Medicine. That's one of the people. I think it was Brian actually that prefers to call ayahuasca medicine instead of
plant medicine.
Plant medicine instead of drug or something, because of the connotation of the word drug. But it's just a word.
Yeah. So how do you determine kind of like when you're going to use these things, if that makes any sense? So like, I feel as though it might be time for my next ayahuasca. You know, I suppose my question is like, once you've done it once, is that ample, or is it something that you'll repeat? And how do you then decide on when you're going to be taking it again?
What I like with the way that I hear people talking about ayahuasca, and the way that the shaman that I work with talked about it, is you work with ayahuasca. So it's not a thing that you take it and suddenly you're done. You wouldn't go to the gym once and expect to then have the perfect physique. That doesn't mean you also need to go like 3 times a week to the psychedelic gym. You know, I'm not saying that, but it's something.
I think I'm overtraining.
I think I'm overtraining. Is this my hand? What is a hand? It's more this awareness that it could be a spring clean for you. It could be that you feel like you've integrated the insights that you've had. Maybe those insights are, I don't care enough for myself, or I need to be more loving for the people around me. You've made that change, and having done that, almost like achieving anything, you go, okay, so what's next? And then maybe you go back and you ask some different questions, and you will have a different experience every time, really, because it's not like you'll suddenly go right back to the same place and have unless perhaps you didn't do what part of you really knows you need to do, and it's like, hey. So I feel that I should and I want to go back and work more with ayahuasca. But it's and I think this year, I thought it would be sooner, but practicalities got in the way, but also my feeling changed, like, yeah, maybe I've got some other things to focus on right now. Maybe I don't need to go and shake up the snow globe again. But I've worked with different psychedelics sort of towards this goal of trying to get down to the core of, well, why do I have experienced whatever the words would be, depression? Why do I feel suicidal? What are the core problems, or I don't know what to call them, like that make me experience things in this way? Mm-hmm. What I think I said the other day was something about the feeling of, I think I need to go work with something again. It's almost like if you've been sitting around for a long time, you're like, I need to stretch my legs. Like I could sort of feel, but as with most things with like psychedelics or stuff people haven't experienced, unless you have experienced it, it's hard to say what I'm talking about. It's only by allegory. But you can recognize a bit like psychedelic art. You go, well, I sort of get what you're doing. It's not really what I experience, but I sort of know what you're channeling here. But if you've never been in the space, it's very strange.
I think of it in similar terms, but I also have a kind of a more tangible sort of measuring stick to kind of decide whether it's time or not. And it's related on a couple of things. First of all, have I loaded my brain with new information that I could use some help sorting out? Like, have I learned more? Have I grown more? Or maybe have I gone back to bad behavior? Or have I learned new bad behavior that maybe needs sorted? So is there more inside of me that, because to me psychedelics give me the ability to kind of just have a mind map of everything. Everything kind of gets sorted. Like I see ideas and things just kind of happening as if it was a projection screen to infinity, and it kind of slots it all in the right place. So, and I have ideas, thoughts, it expands my mind, it increases my intelligence, it makes me think about everything that I was learning or thinking about, and it integrates it. So that it makes it really instinctive. So it's no longer an active process, it just comes out from unconscious sort of learning type scenarios. So that's particularly useful for enhancing your own cognition, sort of, programming your brain a little bit. So that's useful. But also there's the being more centered and present and enlightened sort of part. And that is different. That is when your voice in your head gets too loud, the one that speaks with language, the one that overthinks, that tells you all the time things. Well, if you're depressed, maybe it says you're worthless. If you're an overthinker, maybe it says, what did he think about me? Do you think he was doing this? Do you think he was doing that? Oh, I don't know about that. Like that voice that speaks with language. It speaks in English or whatever language you speak. And you think is your consciousness. It's not. It is just the voice. Your consciousness is deeper, and that's just the press office. So there's a doctor, I can't remember, he's been on London Real, but he says that part of your brain is the press office, whereas the Oval Office, the president, is the part that doesn't have a voice.
I think it was Rory Sutherland that said that.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
But it's true. That's a particular way of imagining it. But it's true, because the language center can speak, and it narrates things after they happen, not before. So you pick up a glass, and then the brain quickly says, you picked up a glass, you're thirsty. But it wasn't that part that made you feel thirsty. It wasn't that part that decided to pick up the glass. And psychedelics make that voice quiet. They eliminate that anxiety, that messiness, that untidiness. It's like someone came and cleaned out your room, and suddenly you're like, oh, that's my book. I've lost that. Ah. Or, it's like, oh, that's right. I do have that, set of clothes. I forgot about that. They were in my washing, and I left them there for 8 months. It's that on a mental level. And you hear your inner voice rather than your constant voice when that happens. It makes this annoying kind of thing that you keep thinking, this is who I am. It makes that go quiet, and you think, actually, I'm so much more. I can hear the other stuff now. This is what I want. This is what I'd like to do. This is who I am. That comes out loudly. And so whenever the other voice gets too loud, I know it's time to make it go a little bit quieter.
But how does it do that then? How do you find that it does that? The quieting.
Oh, because it removes the filter when you're taking it. So my poison of choice, because I find it most effective, and I like the happiness also that comes with it, is LSD. I find I got the most work done with that particular psychedelic. All psychedelics do this, but I find it strong, very, very strong on LSD. It removes the brain filter, the conductor of the orchestra that is your mind. And so everything in your mind plays as loud as it wants, whatever it wants. So all the kind of bits that you repress, all the kind of thoughts that you kind of hold back, get shouted at you and pass through your consciousness, and they get expressed and tired, and suddenly they go, cool. They don't need to speak anymore. They've said their piece. So maybe there's a part of you that wants to shout loudly, like, I don't know, maybe like, expressing yourself is really important to you, but you kind of keep it quiet. Yeah, I know, like, and then it gets shouted at you so loudly during the psychedelic experience, then you're like, okay, I got it. I'll do something about it. Okay? And that part of your brain goes, cool. I just wanted to tell you that. Now I've told you that. I'm good.
That's really beautiful, and that is that rings very true for me. And sometimes it can be very negative. I remember like one day I just spent the whole time crying, and I couldn't work out why. And then a friend said, well, maybe you just had some pain that still needed to be expressed, and it doesn't matter where it came from. And afterwards, like, sometimes it's good to have a good cry, Sometimes you need to let go of some tension, that it doesn't matter anymore where it came from. It's like if you burnt something when you were cooking, it doesn't matter what you burnt anymore. You need to open the windows and let the smoke out. And then the smoke is the smoke. It's its own thing. Let it out.
Yeah. Wow.
We're all dropping acid after this, right?
I want acid right now.
It's really amazing. I haven't had any psychedelic experiences of my own. The whole quieting the mind thing, I tend to maintain a fairly quiet mind. I don't know whether that's just my mind tends not to be that terribly active anyway, or but it's something that I'd be really, I don't know, I'm very interested in it, and I would certainly never condemn anyone for wanting to use them. I think a lot of people go immediately to that instinct of like, oh, these guys are like hippies, like look at them talking about their drug use, and you're just like, come on, like live and let live.
I mean, if you don't feel a desire or an interest to do it, and it's the kind of, oh, well, I could if I don't mind, then I don't think you need to, or maybe it would be interesting once to sort of see what's there, but you definitely don't feel that you ought to. Mm-hmm. But if you have a kind of feeling like, no, absolutely not, that kind of rejection that maybe implies there's something worrying about it to you, maybe that's something to think about. Maybe it doesn't mean you take anything, but maybe it's something to think about. Like, why do you have that kind of strong rejection reaction?
Yeah. Why are you worried about finding who you really are?
Yeah.
Why are you worried about, figuring out that maybe, because clearly you fear that that's probably the case. And then that warrants definitely some soul searching. Yeah. If you think, no, I have a feeling that deep inside of me, I don't like anything about who I am or what I do. You're like,
yeah. When I tell people I'm going for 1 month a meditation retreat at a Buddhist monastery and there's going to be no internet, all the hours of meditation a day, so many people said to me, I would hate that. That sounds awful. How will you manage that? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I imagine that it was challenging in various ways. But I'm like, it sounds quite peaceful. But they're like, no, I would hate that. Oh my God, having to just be alone with my own thoughts. But they said that as though that was kind of fine, and now they're going to get set about their business and get back to work in their day. I'm like, I think you're not okay. I think you might need to relax and maybe talk to someone about this.
It's very common though. There are some people that cannot be alone with their thoughts at all. Like they require either constant company, or perhaps they bury themselves in work. I know a few people like that, people that will just, if something is accomplished, then they can't even enjoy it. They'll just step to something else, because to them it wasn't about getting the accomplishment. To them it was about keeping their mind busy. And so when the thing finishes, it's like, oh shit, all those things that I don't want to think about or deal with. Yeah. So next thing, let's work some more.
That's basically psychosis.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that are in that space though. And a lot of them are really proud because it becomes part of their identity.
I'm so busy.
I'm a hard worker. I'm busy all the time. It never stops over here. Those kinds of statements.
But I know I'm not free of this because, like I said to you, that part of what I discovered on that retreat was that my mind wants to worry. It is disturbed if there's nothing to worry about. So it will find something that maybe yesterday was fine and worry. And it's so intense and terrifying. And it came up in some of the teachings as well, that we perhaps through, I don't know, is it society, is it just some part of how some of us grow up, a part of the human condition, that you're like, I really feel that there should be something to be anxious about. Things surely can't be okay. It's like when people can't enjoy their holiday even because they feel guilty for something, or they're already thinking that it's going to end soon and can't be, just like, switch off. Leave it be. So awareness of that is the first step, but I know that I'm at that step. I'm aware of it. I'm like, you're worrying again. I'm like, yes, I'm really worried.
Oh, man, it's really it's so complicated, and it's really difficult to navigate. Have you listened to? I'm sure you have, like, sort of spiritual teachers and their take on the whole experience of the mind. Like Eckhart Tolle and all these types of spiritual gurus.
I still need to get to Eckhart Tolle because people were telling me about him, and I think there's some stuff there about how it's a bit like having an addiction, like a kind of go to AA therapy style addiction, but to negative thoughts. So I think there's something in there that for me that I need to look at. I've found that podcasts really have been that sort of access to the spiritual discussions, reflections. People like Daniele Bolelli, Aubrey Marcus, Joe Rogan often really, and Nick Gabriel's or Gregoriades, back to that name, his Digital Communion podcast I find really helpful, because I think for me, I have a lot of cool friends, I have a lot of cool conversations, but not that many where we go, okay, let's sit and talk for an hour or whatever about how we understand what our self is. And because most people, they'll do it a little bit, but they just kind of want to get away from it. Kind of, it's uncomfortable, it's strange, or they're just bored, or they don't want to think about that. So podcasts for me are sort of the the wider community where I'm kind of in the conversation even if I'm not speaking.
Yeah. I think looking for the other people that think like that is why we're all in this room right now. Yeah. That's certainly why I found London Real, and I know it's why you found London Real. I don't know about you. And that's how I met you, through London Real.
Yeah.
And it was all about, it was just, oh look, there's other people that are, I mean, I don't even need to agree with their particular answer on that, but they're asking the question. Mm-hmm. They're looking for answers, they're trying to figure things out, they're being chilled about it, they're exploring, like, it's hard to connect with people that think like that because they tend to be the minority. And the internet has allowed all sorts of niche communities to come together. Mm-hmm. I think we're a little bit cooler than, say, furries, but maybe we're just as weird to other people.
Poor furries. They're always the thing people pull out as like...
They're an easy target, to be fair. You never know. I don't know. Maybe I'll enjoy it.
Maybe it'll be a special episode. It's true. Like I found that with in the depths of total despair, a friend of mine said you should listen to some podcasts. What the fuck are podcasts? And just the awareness, as well as the quality of the conversations, but the awareness, people are out there having conversations about stuff that I'm interested in but maybe don't know anything about yet. I found so refreshing and exciting, and that it's through the longer format, the way that people can open up well beyond just a 10-minute sort of soundbite interview. Mm-hmm. And something I really like about Duncan Trussell's podcast, the Duncan Trussell Family Hour, is that as an interviewer, whilst it can be funny and crazy and silly, when emotional things happen, he is fine with silence. And he'll just leave the thing running. And he was, for example, he interviewed his mother twice as she was dying from cancer, very close to the end. And they had these truly emotional moments. It makes me feel a little catch in my throat just thinking about it. And he just left the recorder on. And then they'll be silent for maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes, and then they'll be like, yeah, and then continue. And that kind of level of reality we don't even get in movies or kind of the art where people go, let's show the emotion. Mm.
Mm. Oh, I've not listened to that podcast. Duncan stuff, I'm familiar with his work through Joe Rogan, but I'll need to check that out.
That's pretty spiritual as well.
Yeah. Oh.
Mm. He also pointed out that if, so recent like, MRI type scans showed that under the influence of LSD, your brain reverts to that of a young child, and it's what shows up on an MRI anyways, childlike state. And he said, oh, so clearly what we need now is to create cages to catch newborn babies and incarcerate them because they're experiencing an illegal state of consciousness. So until they get to 7 years old, they need to be locked up because they are a danger. And he's right, that's the logical consequence.
Yeah. Jeez. So when did you guys decide that you were going to start your own podcast? How did that sort of converge?
We did our first recording almost exactly a year ago.
Yeah, we toasted to that last night.
Yeah. When did we decide? It was a little bit before.
Yeah, I think it had to be January, right?
So we decided it in January and then started it. Yeah. Rather than decided it earlier.
Well, because I was out of the country. I was in America.
You came back.
And I came back in the beginning of January, and then we were hanging out.
I remember that sort of Skype call, I guess it was. You were asked because you weren't sure what to do.
Yeah, I was going to be taking up some research fellowship in Washington, and I was just super angsty. What I now understand is I simply didn't want to do it, but I didn't feel like it was possible not to do it. Like I didn't feel like I had a reason that I could give people that they would accept, and that it says so much about me. Or like to myself, this idea of not being basically it's rejection. So the fact that I could go, I simply don't want to do it, and they're like, well, you're a terrible person. I feel rejected. That's terrifying to me. Although I break it down like that, it doesn't sound terrifying, but what I experience emotionally, I'll just like try and avoid it at all costs. Did we discuss on that call that because you were
asking me for advice, and I said, I can't remember at what point we said something about, like, if you come back, we'll do what we called it Dre therapy.
Yes, you did. I think it was on a call around New Year. I was there at your place.
So through my own experiences with psychedelics and my own biomedical studies, I'd come up with what I thought was a protocol for curing depression, and using kind of the same techniques that MAPS uses, like psychedelic assisted psychotherapy and analysis, but more than that, sort of combining several different types of psychedelics at different times. So starting with a particular drug and then doing another one later in particular sequence and for a particular length of time. And I suggested we try it out. And that's kind of where we started talking a bit more closely, and we ended up also deciding to start the podcast. But I think originally we'd set aside time to sort of work on helping Jon sort of get past some of his difficulties.
I was in a fairly catastrophic state at that point as well, like the anxiety of the, like, oh, I don't want to do that bit of research, wait a minute, I don't want to do any of this research stuff, wait a minute, I don't think I want to be in academia, oh, what do I do next? What do I do instead? And the past year has been a kind of trying to find some of that out, and the podcast is definitely one of the things I do want to do instead. Like, I knew I wanted to start a podcast, I knew I wanted to have conversations, I knew I wanted to, but the way I think of it when people say, well, what do you want to do? I want to make cool shit and share it with people. And that can manifest in whatever ways, but that's the core. I want to make the cool shit and I want to share it with people. And that sounds like being human to me. Like, aside from your everyday sort of survival needs and things that are important, well, what else are we here to do? Like, if we have culture which separates us from animals that don't have that let's make cool shit and share it kind of feeling. And I think culture is simply that. It's like, I did this thing. Look, I did this thing. Maybe I felt I had to. Maybe it came from pain. Maybe it came from something else. But we create these things because it is part of our experience of experiencing, of ourselves, of the world, whatever. And so we were talking about wanted to make a podcast, do our own thing, but didn't know exactly what it was. And then we talked a bunch about Robert Greene and his books, because they were another part of like Dre's story of like, how do I understand how people work? Like learning how to human, which is our tagline now. But I feel like without even being autistic, I need this stuff too, because I have trouble understanding how people are. Like, I will be predicting and projecting how I think they're perceiving me and what they're going to do, and it's all wrong. Not all. I suppose I think that I am actually pretty sensitive and intuitive about how people are experiencing a situation and interaction, but it goes too far or gets exaggerated, or they're not in the room and I'm assuming what they might be thinking. So those books were helping me, reading them and understanding how people kind of manipulate you, whether they do it intentionally or not. And so maybe the book was sitting on the table.
Well, I think because we were thinking, like, what do we do? What do we talk about?
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned that I wanted to talk about ideas and things, and I thought that it would be good to start to be specific, to pick one thing and kind of talk about it. And we just threw out a bunch of different things, and that was one of them.
Yeah, we could talk about the book, we talk about the laws and so on, and then I'd already bought a microphone to sort of set this up, and Dre was like, okay, well, let's just talk about the first law of power, and just go from there. And I remember that through the whole thing, I was thinking of it as, this is just like a test, like a pilot thing. We're not actually releasing this. That's the first episode. and it's one of the most popular.
Yeah, it's got the most downloads so far.
Really? And so what's your system for doing the podcast? Like, did you do them, you do them on a certain frequency and then release them as per?
Yeah, so from my own experiences, I knew that there had to be a regular thing to start establishing a relationship of this is what we do. But also we had to accumulate a certain amount of work before we started releasing, because when you release, you want to have a body of content so that if people like it, they've got more to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
So we started recording in January. We only released in June. But from January to June, we almost every single Tuesday recorded an episode.
Something like that, yeah, more or less.
And when we released it, we released a bunch at the same time, and then we also had enough in the can to continue releasing one every week after that.
And then extras as well, because we had the flexibility to do that, other bits of content.
That's brilliant planning.
And the kind of strategy that I push to anyone that I give advice to over anything, but definitely for podcasting, is don't try too hard. Do it. Record one thing, even if it's on your phone, and next time improve one thing. Next time improve one thing. Next time improve one thing. It doesn't have to be a big improvement. It could be
I think
one mic, two mics.
Yeah.
And then one camera, two camera. And if you try to do it all at once, you're just gonna fail because multiple cameras will fail. The sound won't record. You'll forget to do this. Because you haven't done any of it before.
And you'll make a crap show because you'll be thinking about all this other stuff.
Or you might never start because you're like, I don't have enough cameras yet.
Yeah.
I definitely need my show to have 20 cameras. So until I have 20 cameras, I'm not starting out.
But what fascinates me still is the sort of the psychological aspect of where I remember the moment that we had it where we published and we're like, oh my God, it's a thing.
It exists.
Now it's a thing. I mean, but we had like a precursor to that where we were recording where we talked about having a podcast, we'd said what it could be, and then because Dre just went, okay, let's do this now, suddenly it was a thing that we get together and we record. And it is on paper very simple. Okay, you need to keep recording or you need to do that. Psychologically, it's huge. It's like thinking about, I'd like to go to the gym, and actually you're in the gym, you're like, oh, here I am, like stuff's going on. Suddenly I'm in a different situation and there's a momentum behind me, which means that you create your own habit, I guess, of actually creating.
Mm-hmm. So if you recorded from January to June, have you already finished the 48 Laws?
No, because life happens.
Yep.
So we recorded a lot of stuff, but we've finally now caught up with ourselves.
Right.
We're only one episode ahead at the moment.
Yeah, there was a slight issue of me going away for like 6 or 7 weeks to Nepal.
And then a few times where, for whatever reason, we couldn't record, and slowly we caught ourselves up. So now but now we're also in a position to do it better because Jon has eliminated almost all of the responsibilities from his life that he didn't want to deal with. And I have gotten rid of the thing that would often take 12 to 16 hours of my day every single day of every single week. Unreal's been a big part of my life, but I'm glad that it's over. I'm glad that now I get to focus on my own thing. It's funny, since I've quit, I've heard at least once every couple of days, somehow it's come up. Like a video will say it, or a person mentions the quote of, if you're not building your own dream, someone else will hire you to build theirs.
Yeah.
Ever since I quit, I just kept hearing it. And it's obviously, I'm probably more receptive to it, and it's probably a concept that people are thinking more and more, but it did feel like that kind of coincidence, not coincidence kind of feeling of it keeps coming up.
Yeah.
But because it takes up time. You can only, one of the laws is focus, you concentrate your forces. I was trying to have a steady kind of job-ish whilst do my own thing, trying to get back in shape because I had some injuries. I was trying to do all these things at the same time, and it's just a bit much. It's a bit much. You have to spin all these plates, and it's hard to keep them all going. And so now we'll have a lot more time and a lot more energy to focus on just growing this idea that's kind of taken a life of its own.
The tricky thing is that you hear all this kind of advice that tells you, I feel bombarded with things going, just go for your dream. The regret that most people have on their deathbed is they didn't allow themselves to have enough fun or take that risk, or nobody ever on their deathbed said, I wish I'd never, given that thing a shot that I wanted to do. whatever, however it turned out, generally they'll go, well, you know, I tried, I found something out. But this moment where you go, am I going all in or not? I described this to you, where you go, I think you'll be thinking about this, you quit your job, you want to focus on this. The moment where you go, okay, is this the moment where I go all in and I go, yes, this is the success, this is fantastic, I needed to give it all my focus and it's great. Or you go, all my money is gone and this has gone nowhere, it's a complete disaster, and I put everything into it. And unfortunately, it's the same moment. You have no control over what happens next, but when you're, and it sounds obvious, but when you're in it, it's like all those things where people tell you the advice, but when you experience it yourself, like when people tell you things about your relationship, and you're in it, and you're like, you don't understand.
There's that worry that you're in that part of the story that is, Jon had just quit his job to focus on his dream. Little did he know.
No.
You don't want to be in that part of the story. But how do you know?
So, but the nightmare for me, I think what haunts me the most is the image of where I could otherwise be, which is I'm like working a sort of desk job thing with regular hours, with a regular paycheck, and all I do is come home at the end of my 9 to 5. I get home, whether I'm like have a partner or not, and I sit down and I watch a DVD box set on Netflix, and I go to bed, and then I get up and I do the same thing. And then on the weekend, maybe I watch more Netflix. And all that my life revolves around is planning a week break somewhere. And that seems to be most people's lives. And I hate it. I'm not saying, maybe you, whoever's listening, maybe they hate it too. Maybe some people love it, whatever. Just to me, that is, I don't want to do that. That feels like turning me off and just being what I feel that I've grown up in a culture that it tells me that that's what I should do, and that's like happiness and fulfillment. But I feel that's like taking the bits that are me in this body and going off. But it's like cake, it's also attractive. I'm like, just think of every element in culture would then tell me, you're fine, you're doing the right thing, you know, it's comfortable, and you're like, actually Netflix is great, I really like this cake. It's very appealing in that way, so it scares me.
The hilarious part is that socially acceptable, don't worry, life is fine because you have a job, you've pumped out 2.5 kids and everything's good, and you're going on holiday for a week. That is no longer an effective strategy. We're at a turning point in society where doing that doesn't get you enough money to go on holiday.
Yeah, you don't own your house.
Your job makes no sense to anyone, and it'll probably be automated or replaced by computers. We're at a point where that dream that was sold to our fathers and their families or our grandfathers no longer is viable. It's going to go away at some point in the next 50 years. And so what happens then? What happens to those people that are perfectly comfortable having a desk job that will no longer exist?
I was hanging out with some old school friends the other day, and we were thinking about, there was a whole job at our school for an AV technician who was quite an old dude who would just, wheel in the TV set and put the VCR in and had minimal technical ability. And I thought he got it just right because he must have retired at the point where his job will not exist any further. But there's so many people in that situation and they maybe don't realize it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, completely. Yeah. It's like a tsunami's coming and people are totally oblivious to it. It's kind of scary for a lot of people. But it interests me because, podcasts are notoriously difficult to generate an income from. I certainly sort of think that myself. And what's your vision for it, and what are your plans to try and make it sustainable?
Sustainable. Well, there's a few things. So it's becoming easier to monetize a little bit if you're with a certain, there's agencies that bundle together advertising. If you're okay with advertising, if you don't mind having, at the beginning of the show, Dre and Jon only drank this whiskey.
If we get some of the whiskey, then yeah, it's fine.
So because it gets bundled with other shows, you don't have to have millions of listeners. So you might be able to get enough money to kind of keep it going. A little end sponsorship as well. And I think podcasting is going to have a resurgence. So it had a bit of a lull, I think, between probably 2008 till now. Like it kind of went a little bit down, unless you were a big player. Whereas before it was like the thing you did, you list on the internet, you'd listen to those. But I think it's going to come back up. I think it's starting to. And it'll be a little bit easier as well. It's also going to become more standardized. In the UK, it was quite small compared to the US. I think that's going to change a little bit as well. But outside of that, sell an advert or have a sponsor, I think there's a lot of opportunities there to build a brand and connect you with interesting people. So, we've been thinking about selling my expertise in, helping, create and take a podcast to the level that London Real is today as a thing, and that'll be the way we keep the lights on, but we're still doing our artistic endeavor, and it kind of fits in with it. We have a podcast, we know how to build one, we can build one for you, contact us. So you could find some kind of niche that you're an expert in. Could be the topic that you're talking about. So if you have a very niche topic, like if we continued with, let's say, strategy, like we talk about the 48 laws of power, we could continue on that theme and then paint ourselves as the people to talk to for strategy consulting. Perhaps. Or you parlay it into something else. You have a large following of some kind and you sell the brand to someone that has money and needs that following for a different reason. There's so many possibilities there. You're only limited by your imagination, but it takes time. It just takes time to build that up. But having an audience is very, very powerful. It's very, very powerful. And it might not be directly monetizable, or you might not even want to directly monetize it because you don't want to piss them off. Selling at your people, it's not good. But there are people that are willing to invest in you or what you've built if you've built something impressive. And you just got to keep doing it. At some point, it will be big enough to make something out of it. It's just the expectation that you'll have the same kind of income as a 9-to-5 job right away or within a year or two. Maybe not. It's also a startup. And something like 90% of startups fail. So I'm sure 90% of podcasts also fail.
Yeah, one episode and you're gone. So thinking of an example of, like, say, Aubrey Marcus, CEO of On It, has an amazing podcast. So okay, he already had built On It, but his podcast, I think, has probably led to much more than it would appear. So because I feel so invested in Aubrey, I've listened to him for hundreds of hours, and he's given me so much, I guess, how to describe it. I have learnt so much from him, and I feel like I know him in a way. It's that weird one-sided relationship you get in this podcasting, that people will know you or you feel you really know them. That when he said he was launching a course called Go For Your Win, which was going to be a book, now it's a course, I didn't even need to look at the price tag. And I'm not someone with a bank account where that's usually a sensible thing to think. I'm like, Aubrey's running a course, provided he's not asking $1,000 or something. And it's like $250 or something, which is a lot of money to me. But I'm like, Aubrey's doing it, I'm in.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing that you can nurture simply by honestly and truly creating art that connects with other people, and where you're like, I'm giving you this stuff because it's cool to do it, and I want you to be on board with me.
That's your 1,000 true friends type thing. When I built the London Real Academy, which helped turn London Real from just a podcast into a business, when I created that site and we launched it about a year and a half, something to almost, whatever it was, the first 100, 200 people, we asked them a few questions. Most of them didn't even know what it was going to be. But the moment London Real said, there's a thing that you can pay us for, they were like, I was
one of those idiots.
Here's some money, thank you.
Yeah.
The initial people.
Oh.
I mean, it's a good feeling when you get that kind of fanatical support.
I think it's a model that is going to continue. So a friend of mine who listens to various podcasts, he likes the fact that some have a subscription model where he pays like $5 a month, and you get 3 podcasts on their mini network. They end up coming out for free for everyone, but you get them first, maybe a week or so in advance, and you don't have to hear all the ads. But really, he likes it because he gets to support them. He loves what they do, and they provide a way in which you can support. But it seems something that works a bit differently from just saying, from asking for donations, you know, which we've tried, we've heard other people do, and generally I don't think that that's very successful. You'll get like a few people, your true fans will go, yeah, you know, you'll set up a recurring payment of like a few dollars or something. But that's different. It feels weird. But then it's like a charity sort of feeling rather than here is a formalized agreement where like you're a subscriber and you're getting something specific in response. Mm-hmm. But it's tricky. It's like it's playing psychology games here.
Yeah.
I could just give you this money, but we need to find some way in which it's okay.
So give me a reason.
Yeah, you know how it's hard to give things away to people? Like, I've got this old settee, I don't need it anymore. Maybe Gumtree's changed this a bit, but it used to be a problem like, well, I'll just give it to you for free, I don't want it. People actually, I think on Gumtree even, would rather that you wanted a $5 for it. Because something about saying it's worthless means they go, well, it's worthless. I don't want it.
It's very suspicious.
We're weird. Humans are weird.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking at that quite recently, the perception of value kind of thing. You know, if something's like £1,000, even if it's, you know, the same settee, which might be a cast off, if you put a massive price tag on it, people will be like, oh wow, it must be amazing.
It weirds me out because I don't think like that, or I often don't think like that. I'm sure I do sometimes. But this whole thing that if you put a high price tag on it, people go, this is for real. Now, I understand why that works, but I don't think that it often gets me that way. I'm more like, fuck you. It's one of our favourite lines, fuck you, don't tell me what to do.
I think it's one of the most endearing things about the human spirit. Just this defiance, this outrage / somewhat belligerent defiance at being told what to do, even when it's good for you. And I think that's perfectly, like, some people will be like, oh, but you know, that's bad, but like, no, that's what makes humans interesting. This, if I thought of it myself, maybe, but because you've told me, no. Stop trying to control me. Because ultimately it's I call it like if you think of people as software, like every person is their ideas, the collection of all their experiences and thoughts. What people telling you what to do is, it's them trying to write their software over yours. And we are programmed to abhor that because our consciousness rejects it. And I think that's powerful, that's interesting.
Well, that's why one of the central themes of the 48 Laws of Power that we're unpacking in an ebook we're gonna give away is that you can't convince people by arguing with them, and you can't force them to do the things you want to do. You need to get them to see it from a perspective. You need to give a demonstration. You need to plant a seed that then is going to grow on its own. Just show them what's possible. You know, all those scenes in films where someone has rejected the advice for so long and they have a problematic relationship, and then they see someone succeeding doing the thing and they're like, wait a minute, that seems to work. Or like, wait a minute, maybe I do have a connection with my parents after all. And I think that's like the crystallization of how we work. We need to see it play out, and we need to feel like it's you can come along if you want, rather than do this, play this way.
Interesting. So the 48 laws themselves then, I mean, what have been some of the ones for you that have that have kind of had the greatest influence on you?
We were thinking about this ourselves, and we like Jon said, we're putting it together in a little ebook saying this is what we found most useful. I think by far the most useful one is say less than necessary.
Which is funny when in a long interview podcast.
But this idea, for example, that you just sometimes just listen. You don't need to talk all the time, but also maybe don't explain everything. Like, leave a bit of mystery. Like, it recurs in many different ways, in many different aspects of human interaction. Or simply not telling someone right away what your plan is. You know, just give them I'm going to start a podcast, but don't tell them what it is. You know, and funnily enough, by doing that, you gain more power in many ways, because people are more interested. When you sort of giving information away, there's a perception of low value as well.
Yeah.
But if you're sort of holding back, but also it gives you more time to be less reactive, to be a more enlightened and sort of Zen type of person. If you're not constantly trying to talk and get your feelings and ideas out, you're just more introspective, more able to observe others, more able to think about what you think as well, and decide, I might say this, I might say that, as opposed to just kind of being an uncontrollable force. So that was one of the most useful ones.
Yeah, and it's sort of the themes that lie in the laws that can be the key, like what can you distill from them, and one of them which plays into that law but into many others is you need to take care of the other person's emotional need first. Not what my agenda is, not what I want to say, not all of this. What's going on for them? How are they perceiving this situation, and what's important? And Dre's been reading this book about acting, which really I think helps.
The Power of the Actor by Ivana Chubbuck. She's
right,
an acting coach to like Brad Pitt.
She's been on London Real.
Yeah. So the book is really interesting because it talks about acting in a way that I think kind of mirrored some of my own thoughts about human psychology in general. So now I've begun to try and apply the teachings to the real world, imagining that every single interaction is a scene and every person is a character and they have a character that they portray. And so we were talking about core needs. What is their core need? In acting terms, that's called the overall objective. So a particular character might need to feel loved as their overall objective, or they might need to get their power back. People are the same. And so when they talk to you, their interaction with you and what they're trying to say and what they want from you is centered around their overall objective, just as if they were a character. So you meet someone at the pub and you tell them that they ask you what you're doing, and you say, well, I don't really know if that's a relevant question, and they act defensively towards it. That's because their core need is to feel, let's say, significant, and you challenging the premise that their job, it defines them in any way, defines you in any way, means that maybe they're wrong to define themselves by their job, which is what they feel significant about, and therefore by doing that you've attacked them as a person, and that's why they're defensive, that kind of thing. So by addressing their core need to feel significant, by making them feel important and like their job is cool, you've disarmed that, and then you can get past that huge obstacle that otherwise would be the thing that they keep trying to get from you, and you can't get past it, because until they feel significant from you, you haven't hit that core need, and they can't think of anything else other than desperately trying to get that from you.
In like the simplest terms, I can think of, if you're meeting someone and you maybe want like advice or help from or so on, but they consider themselves as sort of, they're a bit more senior to you in some way, you need to acknowledge the fact that they're doing you a favor. You need to go, thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate that. And we kind of know that instinctively. And you do that and they're like, oh, that's no problem at all. And then suddenly everything flows. But if you don't do it, they're going to spend the whole time being like, little fuck, doesn't respect me, doesn't appreciate the time that I've given out, why am I doing this? It can be tiny things, you don't need to necessarily get lost in they're thinking that I'm thinking that you're thinking.
Yeah, exactly, and which was what I was really going to say. Like, at what level does it simply become massively overthinking very straightforward situations?
So I find that it's the same as pickup artists versus someone who's good at just being charming. There is a learning curve, but it's kind of tough luck. You were supposed to learn it at kindergarten by having lots of interactions and feeling comfortable and so on, and you didn't. Like you were maybe the nerdy kid or geeky kid, and you didn't spend so much time talking to people. You were more interested in the Lego blocks. You didn't pick up those charming social skills. Shit out of luck. You have to learn it from a book. And guess what? It will be kind of mechanical for a while. But if you do it enough and you don't obsess over the steps, and you know that they're just shortcuts to get you to skip ahead a little bit so that you can practice, then you can practice. And if you keep practicing, eventually it becomes unconscious learning, and then the overthinking goes away.
And some of the practices, until you've been told, you don't know what to practice. Yeah. I mean, it's like, think back to all at school, and everyone's going, how do you even have sex? because you don't know. And you need to sort of be told. So then there's some instinct stuff that's going to come in and help you and so on, but there's also information that you really need to know if you're going to get anywhere. And then you practice, hopefully. Hopefully you practice.
Lots of practice.
It's like usually, I'm trying to think, there's quite a few situations where, you know, if you're at point A and you want to get to point Z, the best way often to do that is through mentorship. You know, you find somebody who's kind of where you want to be and you just have them kind of handhold you through that process. But can that be applied to learning how to be a human and how to be social?
If you find someone willing to spend that kind of time with you, yeah. I mean, the reason I sort of give up on mentorships, other than virtual ones from like books and podcasts and talking, like seeing people that way, but like a direct mentorship, I give up on it purely because in this day and age, people don't have fucking time for you. they don't have time for you. And like, unless you're like a young kid willing to work for free or something like Ryan Holiday did for Robert Greene, you're unlikely to be able to get someone that is that senior or interesting to be able to be around them that way. Mm-hmm. It's a shame that that's no longer the case, but yeah, it becomes a bit weird and difficult that way. Sorry, I've kind of lost my plot there. I forgot why I was...
that kind of addressed it. Yeah, you're probably right.
No, I'd love to have like a cool person that is super charming. Like I'd love... in terms of social skills, even though I suppose they can be seen as quite seedy by some people, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bill Clinton are probably, in my mind, alive today, maybe the most charming people ever. And they've got some particular skills that I know of, like so Bill Clinton used to keep like a Rolodex of cards of people that he met with details about them, and he'd go through them, and like he'd memorize them and so on, so that he's met someone 2 years later, it's like, hey Bob, like how you doing? Like great to see you, how's the wife? Like I remember that she was struggling with such and such. And he became really, really good at that. But obviously he had also had the Southern charm and all that stuff. But people felt like you were the only person in the room.
Yeah.
Like he was there for the minute that he was talking to you. You're the only person that exists, and he's interested in you.
And so when people say things like, this is manipulation, this is bad, but isn't that also beautiful what just happened? He genuinely did care enough to learn that and remember you, and to make you feel like the only person in the room.
Yeah. So like if
yes.
if I could learn that directly, that would be amazing. But at that level, you know, like the person's unlikely to be your direct mentor. You have to read about them, maybe look at videos about them and try to pick up their behaviors that way.
Yeah.
I think often with a lot of focus, I keep coming across that you must find a mentor. Well, perhaps you're in a phase of your life or in a world, in a country and whatever, you're just not going to meet someone who's worth being your mentor. So don't get one for the sake of it. I feel like maybe I've had sort of certain sorts of mentor, mostly to do with academia, but I don't know where to look for like the mentor beyond that, now that I don't want to be in that world. And I had I was thinking when you described this, that making someone feel insecure about their own thing, I've had to stop myself really talking about, to many of my friends from the academic world, I shouldn't talk about, I'm leaving it because it makes me fucking miserable and I think most of it's pointless, because that's their life. And it's completely legitimate that if that's working for them, then that's fine. But I think we all have this habit, and this is what I've been experiencing, that because you want to reject something and get away from it because it's not making you happy, you want to say it's shit, objectively. But that's not the case. My perception, my interaction with it is not positive.
Yeah.
Guess what, folks? It's not black and white. And I'm bumbling through life discovering that over and over again.
And mentors are funny, you know. You will eventually feel like it's a funny relationship. You have to know a few things. For example, you will fall out with them in some way. Either they'll stop liking you, you'll stop liking them. We know this very well, I think.
And the first law of power. is directly about this. Never outshine the master.
And there's other little things that are intricate in that particular aspect, and it's just a funny relationship.
So if you were to like go back in time essentially and relive your life to date, knowing the information that you have now, I can tell you're probably going to seize up at this question.
I'm going to have a fit.
Yeah, like what sort of things would you have done differently?
Oh, I probably would have straight out of high school gone to America, and just went to LA and worked, like found a day job, worked hard, tried to maybe get into acting, and tried to I would try to build a power base there for when YouTube hits, to become a YouTube personality. Probably something like that. Well, it depends. What is the knowledge? Because then you can also invest in things, you know. But if it's just on a personal level, like you don't have any kind of other things, I think so. I think I would have probably taken more human subjects at school, less science. I liked science, but I needed the practice of peopling that I didn't get until later. But yeah, I probably wouldn't go to university, and I would try to go to America and try to base myself in Los Angeles, because I like the idea of doing stuff on YouTube, and it would have been easy to do. I know what I should have done in 2006 to be the biggest YouTuber now, but now it's too late. So probably something like that, maybe, just to build that kind of power base. To then do all the other things I want to do, because I've got big aspirations, and most of my life has been going, well, what is the right way to get there, and getting it wrong, very, very wrong. And so, I'm not anywhere nearer to my super long-term goals, and now I'm kind of going, how do I get? Once again, asking myself the question, how do I get there? And if I went back, the way I would get there would be to just start working with people, and interacting and going where the action is, rather than thinking I need to go through formal education and have my degree to be able to then think about that. Try to figure it out, practice, do things, improve one thing each time. Maybe I wouldn't have been an actor at all. Maybe I would have done something else. But by starting earlier, you go further. Don't know about you.
I think it's tricky when looking back, when you go, what I instinctively think, what if I said I wouldn't go to university? I then think, but all those really cool people who are so important to me that I learnt so much from, even if I wouldn't want to have not met them. And even though I can say hypothetically I would have met other people, they don't exist to me in this reality, so I can't, I don't really value them. The ones that I did, I do value. But I think, apart from it, buying lots of Bitcoin, that would have been a wise move. I think if the right conditions were available, the right sort of psychedelics mentor, I think working with them earlier would have been very good for me, to not get the grooves as deep as they've become of the negativity and insecurity and feeling worthless and so on. I don't know what to think about the whole sort of academia path, because so much of the things that drew me to it are truly parts of me. That curiosity and wanting to find things out and trying to creatively understand questions that keep going around for me. The things that I studied for my PhD were about how people made sense of their lives under the repressive Stalin regime. I'm like, well, what the fuck was that like? And all the books I'm reading are not telling me. They're just saying that people are just terrified because of repressive violence, or they were brainwashed because of the propaganda. And I thought, this is not what people are like. I have not met people who are like this, maybe one or two, and they were idiots. So let's assume that most people aren't like this. And then I noticed that there was evidence that people were telling jokes all the time in that regime, when they would be put away for this. So it's dangerous. So why are they doing it? Well, because they had to. And what can we see of their perception of their reality in those little traces, rather than the rest that survives to us, which tends to be them going, I devoutly believe in Stalin, or I hate the regime, or in memoirs they're like, I was always against it, or what at the time were they saying to each other? And so I wrote a whole PhD about jokes that people told in that regime. Why? Because that sort of question fascinates me. And as I think about it now from this perspective, it's also about how do people make sense of their reality? And that seems to be a continuing theme that we're still working on in the podcast. It's like discovering how to human, how we do it, how we perceive. So I don't know, how does that fit with I certainly learned a lot and developed a lot in myself by following that trajectory, but maybe I would have got off the bus earlier and gone in different directions. I think what I would definitely have done would be to learn more languages and to have really applied myself and found ways to enjoy it, because I feel like and I know people who can do this, that if you have those languages and you're really good, you can earn your keep pretty straightforwardly by doing translation work freelance. And then, that's your skill, you've got it, it's in your head. You don't have to have like premises or complicated things or a 9-to-5 or anything, and then you can go and do your, what Neil Gaiman says, make good art. And that's what I want to be doing.
I would have learned how to program. I shied away from that world because I thought I could do more that interested me by going straight to biology, which is what I wanted to achieve long term. But if I'd been able to build Angry Birds, for example, or something, or even code YouTube, it sold to Google for billions at the time that it did, right? So 2006, I if I went to uni to learn coding, would have been 2001, something like that. I could have invented YouTube potentially, who knows? And then I would have had the money, just like Elon Musk, to build his dreams of Tesla and like SpaceX and so on. So he went that way.
I was actually, his name came into my head when I was thinking about you with your where do you think that sort of massive visioning stuff comes from?
I don't know, my brain just kind of works that way. Like, it'll even work that way on little things. Like someone will tell me, I'm thinking of, starting a small company that sells jams online. And right away, fuck, it's happening. My brain is starting to think like, oh, that's cool. The label should be like this. It should be old-fashioned. It should look like that. The marketing should be done like that. The website can work that way. I suppose you could get suppliers to it has to put the things together and kind of knit it.
It's terrifying.
So that's just what my mind does, and I like thinking. That's what I enjoy, and
there's not enough of a premium put on that.
Yeah.
Just I like thinking, and I like, putting that out there and realizing that thinking. Now I think I feel like I've grown up in a world that tells me that's not good enough. What's the real stuff you're putting together? Like, we can't all be philosophers. I'm like, well, I'm sure the actual philosophers were also told that. And look at the stuff they wrote down.
Plato's mom was like, come on.
Do something useful. And like, come on, that's not putting bread and butter on the table, is it? All of these thoughts, all of this nature of existence stuff. Come out of your bloody cave and eat something. It's always the strange sort of feeling of a fight to do the thing that feels natural, unless the thing that you do that's natural is already something that is given validation by society.
Yeah.
And then, maybe it isn't. Like, you have pop stars, you have singers, and you're like, it's totally fine. I think most people look at them and go, well, they're singers, that's what they do, they're an artist, that's great. But then you have your friend who sings really well, and you're just like, come on, get a real job, that's never going to go anywhere. Like, delegitimizing the thing that for the few you say is okay. And that's confusing.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, like, this show is very much about, like, I like to say reconnect with purpose, like reconnect with your purpose, which is very much, I suppose, getting away from the whole mentality of just doing stuff because other people think you should do it. It's like aligning yourself with your own personal values, the things that, your own desires, and understanding yourself and why you kind of tick that way. So I'm going to ask you another big question. Yeah, what is your purpose?
Ooh, I'll let you start.
Oh, good. I think the more that we put together our sense of what Voices in the Dark is about, the more that I feel, well, this is also what I'm about. And we have the way we like to sign off the show. I think our guiding principle is be silly, be kind, be weird. I feel like that's me. Another thing that comes up is play, and remember that it's all a game that you're playing. And in the game, be silly and be kind and be weird. And that immediately I go, but is that enough? Yeah, it is. It is enough. Combined with, I guess, my desire to make good art, make cool shit, and share it with people. And it's only, so say, under the influence of a psychedelic, those things that can come up, I'm like, that is completely and purely the thing that I am and want to be and will be. That's my song, and I am going to sing it. And then you leave that state and come back into a world where they immediately go, well, how are you going to make money out of that? And in the psychedelic state, you're like, money is pointless. What are we doing? This is ridiculous. And then suddenly you come back and we know why money is important. We know why the world actually works like this and so on. And it all becomes so much more complicated than it is, which is why you can ask the question, how do we reconnect with our purpose? Well, I think the problem is often that you reconnect with your purpose. There it is. Make cool shit, share it with people. And then you go, oh. Like, I'm with my purpose, now how do I do it? And I think the complicated thing is not necessarily the purpose, it's the how that comes afterwards. There's another Neil Gaiman thing he said in the commencement speech that Tim Ferriss talks about a lot, and I've watched a few times recently, is it helps if you don't know what's impossible. And I think that I've spent so much of my life around people and institutions that tell me that things are impossible. And he says, if you don't know it's impossible, then it's easier to do. And I think there's a lot of truth, a lot of wisdom in that.
There's an example that I love, which was there was a particular weightlifting record, Olympic weightlifting record, that no one thought it could be possible to go past. And then there was like a genetic freak that did it, like a massive dude. But the moment he did it, then that record started getting broken. It was like, I don't know, 1,000 pounds or something. Something like, it was a really round number. The moment one person did it, other people knew that it could be done. And it started getting broken repeatedly. People broke that barrier. If you don't know you're allowed to go outside, so I have my own room, but we all have little rooms that we can't go outside because we don't know it's possible.
Yeah.
The moment you see someone walk out, you're like, am I allowed? Okay.
Was there a door there? I didn't.
So yeah. But for me, I guess increasing the complexity of the music of the universe. This is the best way I can say it.
I'm going to make notes. I need to rephrase my...
I want to advance humanity. I want to raise the bar. I want to inspire and lead. I like being a leader. I like being at the front. And I want to do stuff that, makes a clear turning point in the history books. I want to change us biologically to the point that we don't have to die of old age if we don't want to. What is that going to do to society? Maybe there's be massive problems, but you know what? Let's figure it out. Rather than, oh yeah, no, we're meant to die. Like, well, what if we weren't? What if that was no longer a thing? What happens afterwards? Would society become better? Would it become worse? Let's try it out. I want to get humanity outside of the solar system. Let's explore space. Let's make Star Trek real. Like what is outside there? Let's go and find out. Let's go discover it. I want to terraform planets just so that we can discover what it's like. Like, we could potentially see evolution happen over a period of 2 million years. Just seed a planet with basic life and study it for that long. What an exciting endeavor to not just theorize about it, but see it. Like, those are the kinds of things that my mind thinks about and that I want to do. And that's why I see my purpose as trying to make that happen. Really giving it a go, to pushing the envelope outside and raising the bar of what's impossible. I want kids 1,000 years from now to think, like, sorry, what? They thought that they couldn't do that? Mm-hmm. Why?
On the micro scale, I think one of the most rewarding feelings that I have ever had is helping, like when I've taught students and helped them say what they were trying to say but didn't know how to say, and give them, and I feel like it's the same thing. It's like, okay, I think this is possible. Let's see if we can't make it possible for you to do the thing that you're capable of doing and want to do. Which sounds like I should then be a teacher, but I think the format of the education system makes that a very unpleasant and unfulfilling. Like it betrays the very soul of it.
You're not really allowed to do that properly within the teaching system.
Yeah, you're not allowed to teach in the teaching system. You just have to go jump through this hoop and this hoop. So maybe something like what we're creating is, it is make the shit, show it to people, and then you don't know what they'll do with it, but you're trying to say, well, this is the fruits of the experiences that we've had. Here are some ideas. And the more that you share these things, other people's minds spark and they set about doing their things. And maybe they feed back into yours, maybe they go off their way. But it's a creative thing rather than just this stasis of acceptance.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So you said earlier that you tend not to like to do things for more than a couple of years. So where do you see Voices in the Dark in like 5 years?
Fear for our friendship.
Where would you like it to be?
I'd like it to be multiple shows. I mean, like a production powerhouse that creates film, television, lots of podcasts, documentaries, sort of like a combination of HBO and Vice and, just putting out really good quality content.
And a publishing house.
Creating art that speaks, that says a message, that helps people find what they're looking for.
Or ask them questions. That's the idea. I agree. It's
okay.
Good. We have
cool.
Alignment here.
Hey!
I want
what are you talking about? We're selling.
Both. I want to sell. We're selling life insurance. I want those things to exist so that we are providing a place in which other people can express and create their art too, that we can be part of like this, a creative collective that isn't about just sharing your underwear and generally being annoying to each other before you all go off and go back to your regular Netflix watching every evening lives, but got such a complex. But instead, as Dre's saying, these multiple outlets where something like the idea of what Vice was meant to be at the beginning, before it just became very boring and predictable, I suppose, some elements of that at least. But to have like this, the creative space for other people to be creative in, where we can make our own art, but know that we're also passing that on directly to people so they can be doing theirs. It'd be like, if it was in publishing, it would be like, okay, you're already a successful author with all of this, so sometimes they do this, but more than like giving a jacket quote to somebody and saying this person's good, well, what if you help get them signed up? What if you start, I think it works better in music, you start your own label and you sign the people that you hear are good and you invest in them even though they might not turn a profit, because your integrity and focus is on this music, this art is great, and I want to get it out there, and I have the ability in a mentor figure to do that, to help with that.
Mm-hmm. My new personal tagline comes to mind. So people ask me what do I do, and it's hard to describe because it's not any one specific thing. I've changed it so many. Within even London Real, I've done the PR, the guest booking. I've built their website. It changed so many times because it's just whatever needed to be done. Mm-hmm. If I knew how to do it, I would do it. If I didn't know how to do it, I'd learn and then do it. So my tagline for that, when I try to describe to people, what do you do, is I help cool people do cool shit. And I think that's really the essence of what we both want to do.
I think we're really erudite, you know. It's always about shit, and we do fucking shit. Boom.
Okay, I've got one last big question for you. If you could change anything in the world, what would it be and why?
Anything come to mind for you?
I mean, I think we should have like worthy answers, but I suppose maybe this does make sense as an answer. I would want to do the thing I'm doing, which is change myself. And why? Because the world only exists for me as I perceive it. And if I can change my perception of it, that is, I think, the closest I can come to changing anything. And that doesn't mean I sit at home and go, oh, everything's fine now. But the way, as the Buddhists would say, and others would take the approach, that you have to be all right in yourself and coming from a positive place in order to affect anything. And if you go, and I found this when I've had the moments where I've been meditating frequently, I am at this peaceful place with myself, then I can kind of change the world around me because other people are stressing out, but simply the energy, the place that I'm in, the fact that they look to me to see if I'm annoyed too, and I'm like, no, it's fine, let me help, let me do this. You become a demonstration to people of how they could be. Mm-hmm. Maybe we've all, I think, experienced this where there's just one person in the room who seems to change the whole dynamic in a positive way. It can happen in a negative way too, but in that positive way, where they give you an example of something else. There's a selfish motivation. I would like to not feel so bad and feel so negative and feel so anxious and still, feel like on a day-to-day basis, I might feel like it would be better if I killed myself. I'd like to not feel that way, amazingly. But I see that as because then the things that I can do and contribute in a realistic way to the world, I think will be improved if I can keep developing, working and giving and sharing that to other people, which I think is a realistic, if I want to play this question as what can I actually do, rather than I'd like to eliminate world hunger and so forth, then yeah, I guess something like that.
Just things that, so I'm torn because I keep thinking of things that would help raise the bar on humanity to, well, we figured this out, now we have to step it up. But I feel like solving it overnight with the click of a fingers might have completely unintended consequences. So I'll give you an example. Let's say it's like a genie's wish. Tomorrow everyone will wake up and their core emotional need will no longer be there. It'll be addressed. So if you needed to feel loved, you feel loved. If you needed to feel significant, you feel significant. Then I thought, wouldn't society just collapse? People would just be like, I don't need to go out to work tomorrow. I don't need to go and I'm good. I've achieved my purpose in life. It might have completely unintended consequences. So I don't know. I'm not sure. But potentially, either universal basic income, if that became a thing worldwide, or free unlimited energy in the form of nuclear fusion. Either of those two things would be, it solves so many problems for humans that now, what do we do with our lives? If everybody has universal basic income, if everybody can pay for their food and shelter and to exist without having to do a no-purpose clerical admin job that society does not need, so they can sit back and think, maybe I'll compose a symphony. What would happen? What art could be created? What inventions could be had if that happened? And same things with free energy, because we could deliver something like that. There would be enough power to have enough food and warmth and everything that we need. And then it's that Star Trek point. It's that achieving, one on the Kardashev scale of, I don't know if you know that. The Kardashev scale is the scale of sort of societies, One is being able to utilize the energy of your planet, two of your solar system, or so on. It's sort of how advanced.
Is that within Star Trek? Or?
No, it's like a science fiction term, but it's that singularity point of, well, we've now moved to like level 1 complete. So what does level 2 look like? That to me is exciting. But I feel like maybe we should have to work for that. Maybe it shouldn't be like a thing that I solve overnight. I don't know.
Wow.
We're down with universal basic income. This comes up in the show quite often, this sense that so many of us operate, and I feel myself operating from the mindset of scarcity and fear, that, oh, but I still need to have a job that I don't actually want to do, because guess what, I need to pay my bills and I need to feed myself, and if you weren't conditioned into that thinking of, but I need these things, there's no way out, and I also need to sleep, so I can't just do everything for my dream at night, then people, I think, would do many more things.
Someone that maybe realizes that their job is going to die out, like a coal miner, would be able to like take a break, go back to school, learn a new trade.
Yeah.
Like it's not like, shit, I need to lobby the coal industry, to lobby the government to maintain coal, even though it's not needed. Like that kind of disappears, because that fear of, I need the world to stay as it is gone, because you can kind of just take back and kind of think, well, what would I like to do? What do I want to do?
Mm-hmm. But I mean, presumably the biggest counter argument to that is the fact that we just encourage people to do nothing.
But is that a problem? Do we need everybody to do everything? We don't only, automation, computers and machines mean that you could have like 80% of the population doing nothing. Because technically, if you look at what people do at work, most of them are doing nothing right now. It's just they're pretending not to.
Yeah.
They're Facebooking their way through what should be a 2 or 3 hour day for 8 hours. And like, why do we make them pretend? Why isn't it okay that they're home teaching their children about the great literature and playing with them? Like, if they need to do something, then the need will arise and someone will do it. Like, there's no, I mean, would you go to a caveman who's just playing in the sun and throwing rocks in a pond and going, what is your purpose? What are you doing right now?
What are you contributing?
You're not contributing to society. I'm like, well, he doesn't need to. And we had to, for a while, to be able to live in large numbers together, because otherwise things would break down. But we're about to come out of the end of that tunnel, where there will be a point where we will not necessarily need to. And so we should start preparing for that, because it's going to happen whether we want it or not.
And something terrible has happened, that we think of that you need to justify your existence. No, you don't. You exist because you exist. You exist because your mum and dad fucked. That's it, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you, guys.
That's why, and yet you asked the question, I felt the question in myself as you were asking it, like, but won't people do nothing? And I love that you said, well, why should they even need to? Because we've just encoded it as that's bad, because laziness is bad, because, like, well, no, why do you think we look at children and see how carefree and excited they are, and we look at them and go, wow, that seems wonderful. How wonderful it is to be a child.
But he's not filling in a spreadsheet.
Yeah, so now
clearly he shouldn't exist.
We need to trash that. And the second part of, I think, the answer is that, okay, some people maybe will do nothing in terms of the way that we think of what something is right now. But others, I think maybe most, people do things. People like doing things. Some people will just go and enjoy gardening. Or maybe they'll make the local area more pretty for other people. Some people are just great at being like social organizers and will do little clubs, get people together. Some people like doing sports, they'll go and do sporty things.
Maybe they're just purely a good shoulder to cry on for their family.
Yeah, and that
could be their purpose.
That's more than enough.
But they can't do that if you forcing them to work 12 hours a day for something that doesn't need to be done.
But people do need to do that because they need money to be able to survive in the real world.
Yes. So once that's removed, what happens then?
Mm-hmm.
That's why I like it as an idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there'll be complications that I haven't thought of.
Well, and it doesn't give you enough to have more than the basic. So you would still then go, okay, well, I need to do something. I feel most people, I think, would go, I can buy the things that I want in addition to the basics. So what will it be? But I don't have to take just anything. Maybe I'll try this. Maybe I've always fancied doing this, and then you go and give that a go. And what would that thing be? you know? I think that's very exciting, and then it's very depressing to walk out the door and go, that doesn't exist. They can, it's beginning to be tried. I think in Finland, is it? Yeah. They're just putting it into action. Well, let's see what happens. And ignore the fuckheads who say, oh, in Scandinavian countries, everything. I don't think Finland even counts as Scandinavia, but I don't know.
Yeah, it does, I think.
I'm sure
they're not one of the ones that...
I'm sure Russia thinks it
Russia thinks otherwise. No.
Sweden, Norway, Finland.
I guess I think of it as we often think of it as linguistically similar, and that's not true of Finnish. I think that's why I'm getting confused. Yeah, so let's see what happens there, and not just say, oh, it's a smaller country and they're more culturally singular compared to others and blah, blah, blah. Let's see what happens and keep our minds open.
If we don't, when 90% of jobs are done by computers and machines, there'll be a revolution. Because if you haven't taken care of the 99%, when you're not feeding them, they will rebel. They will tear down your door. When they're just unhappy because they don't have too much money and their job sucks, you might be able to keep them down and make Anonymous not grow too large. But when they're dying because they've not enough food, you're going to get a French Revolution all over again. So let's figure it out before it gets there.
It feels like we're a long way away from that, though.
Well, we might be a little, well, I don't know.
That's what everyone thinks before it happens, though. It's always a surprise when it actually happens. Do you think we'll witness
that within our lifetimes?
I think so. I've seen some, like, a lot of workers will their jobs are going to disappear in the next 20, 30 years. Like, machines will do them. Other jobs will be done by software. I've already seen like a really, someone that got shafted by a lawyer in America created a website where you can input some really basic information and it spits out legal documents for you so that you don't need a lawyer. So what's that going to mean is that you still have lawyers, but for really top end stuff. But all those middle lawyers, the ones that didn't do too well in school, the average lawyer job will disappear because you won't need it. A computer will do it. You know, governments will get more efficient and simple about tax, so it's done automatically for you by software. Like, it's all these things will remove will remove accountants. It'll remove the middle class jobs as well as the poor jobs. Yeah. And then what's left? What do people do? Like, I guess we can't all be YouTubers. Maybe, who knows? But that's going to happen within our lifetime, and that's going to be really weird and confusing. Oh, unless there's a complete societal collapse. So the reason why it might not happen is if World War III happens and resets us back.
Or if we get hit by an asteroid and we are overdue. Just so everyone knows.
So if that's the case, then maybe it's further away, because there could be such disastrous consequences worldwide that we can't get there. And so it's delayed by a century or two whilst we rebuild back to that level.
Yeah, or just like cancel the internet.
The internet is cancelled. No.
Or maybe Trump is going to cancel culture. I don't know what's going to...
Just an announcement.
Over.
Good morning, America. Culture is cancelled. Yeah!
Brilliant. Guys, it's been such a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, it's been amazing.
I've loved talking to you.
Thank you for
really
having
interesting. You've both got incredible minds. You know, just really, really fascinating stuff. And I can't wait to see where you go with Voice in the Dark. It looks set for stardom.
Wow, it's going to be fun.
That's good. That's lovely to hear, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I do believe it. So yeah, thank you so much for coming, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, and to you.
Cheers. Thank you for taking the time to watch Inspired Edinburgh. If you enjoyed watching this video, I'd really appreciate if you'd like and share it. You can also sign up to our mailing list and social media channels using the details coming up on your screen now. If you have any feedback or suggestions, please feel free to comment. Until next time, reconnect with your purpose and inspire others.